Hello there, and welcome to the Get French Football News Preview Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening, as ever, are Adam White and Samuel Rooke. After a week filled with jealousy, anger, and fallouts, it's nice to get out of Pamela Anderson's personal life and back into the footballing world. So, without further ado, because without any midweek games, we don't have too much news to bring you. Let's dive in straight into the weekend's fixtures, and let's start with Friday evening's game with Lille hosting Monaco. And Adam, Marcelo Bielsa was pretty pricky to journalists this week, asking about his future and his previous in Marseille as well. So, keeping in the spirit of things, should his side get spanked here, does he go?
It's an interesting one. I don't think so. They've obviously started terribly. That 3-0 win against Nantes on the opening day of the season seems like a very, very long time ago. In a game which they looked really good. I sort of thought that at that point, obviously very early stages, but they were on for a top six finish the way they started. But since then, they've only got 2 more points in the last 5 games, and he scored 4 goals. They're in 17th. And as you mentioned, Bielsa had a very interesting press conference this week, in which it was sort of rumoured that he might be on his way a little. It was not necessarily on his way, but there was sort of rumours that he could be edging towards the exit door, given how his spell at Marseille ended, and then it ended very abruptly. Confusion, and sort of it was a bit sort of unsure as to why he moved on. And I think he addressed those issues pretty in a forthright manner. Was very, very, very forward with quite a few journalists at that press conference who he was very angry with. About sort of the way he perceived himself to be treated. It was interesting that he talked a lot about so he was given sort of an ultimatum or told that he'd be paid sort of 10% less at Marseille for the following season without any reason. So he resigned, which sort of seems fair enough. That that the lawyer and an associate of the president could come and say that to him and him not be. You can understand that's why he would want to move on. And he said that in terms of Lille, that the only way he says that he'll leave this season is if he's sacked. Which to be honest, I can sort of on board with what he's saying now. I can see his point of view, and it feels like that's what he wants to happen. But given this is Marcelo Bielsa, who's had a very, very changeable career, obviously the two days at Lazio last summer are another sort of sticking point, if you like. That could quite easily change. But in terms of this game, even if they were to get destroyed by Monaco tomorrow night, I don't think he'd be on his way. I think there's still a long way to go with this Lille team. Given they've only played 6 games, they've had such a huge player turnover in the last 6 months. Since the January transfer window, they signed 7 players on transfer deadline day, signed another 9 or 10 over the summer. Sort of be getting towards 15, 20 players moving on in that time as well. Kevin Malky is the oldest player in the squad, which is ridiculous. He's 26 years old. But if you exclude Vincent Anyama, who's been sort of ostracised and exiled, and they've got an average age of just under 22. So there's a very, very long way to go, and there's a lot of potential in this team. And I doubt that, even though they've been playing very poorly in the last few games, that Bielsa would consider leaving this early. And I don't think that Gerard Lopez, Lille's owner, would be keen to get rid of him either, given how much effort he put into securing his signature and the fact that this is a long-term project. And I still think there's a long, long way to go for the Lille team and for Marcelo Bielsa. But it'd be interesting to see how his players react and how he reacts should they lose. I think there'll obviously be more questions for him following that game, should they lose heavily. And it'll be interesting to see the fallout from that. But for me, I think he's Lille manager for a long time yet.
He was a little bit ducking and diving those Marseille questions, it seems, and I feel a little bit sorry for some of the journalists because correct me if I'm wrong. When he did leave Marseille, it was the first game of the season. It was pretty much straight after that he resigned. So unless those lawyers, as he said, came to speak to him very quickly after that match or within then and the next day, and he resigned after that, and keeping quiet for so long when it was so shrouded in mystery does seem strange, especially if that administration has gone. And yeah, he didn't mention those 2 days in Lazio. That seemed to slip his mind, didn't it, when people were mentioning that he sometimes makes a slightly hasty, unnoticed exit.
I think that's probably the problem here, right? I think that's probably what sort of was in the offing here, that people kind of expecting him to just make another rash decision and turn around and leave. But I think he's a little bit more invested than perhaps the journalists give him credit for. I think that before that Corn game with Marseille, when he was resigned before, I think he said he made a decision like 2 days beforehand, and then decided to play that game and then leave afterwards. He sort of wrote that letter that he read out to the journalists at that press conference. So I think there's probably I think that meeting took place a little bit before that game, so rather than straight afterwards. So I think there's a little bit of nuance there that perhaps wasn't fully fleshed out at the press conference. But yeah, it's still Marcelo Bielsa, so there's still a lot that can change. But I think for now, I don't see him moving on any time in the near future.
Seemingly. Does that and last week's result in Germany in the Champions League make that Nice defeat feel a little bit more like a brief blip, or is there still some concerns for you for them going forward?
That Nice game does now feel well and truly in the rearview mirror. It was an exceptional day for both Monaco and Nice. That was Nice's best performance of the season up to that point, and clearly Monaco's worst. It's worth remembering that it was the same result last season when Monaco was still the Monaco that we know. So there was not a huge reason to overreact to one bad game, and they did turn it around again very quickly. The Champions League draw away in Germany, as we discussed, a worthy performance of a top draw competition, and then to come out at the weekend again and do what needs to be done. Nothing too worrying there, but there should be still little reasons for concerns. Falcao's return to Atletico Madrid level Falcao. This is what we've seen this season. Last season he was very good. This season he's been great. That's papering over some of the cracks. He's scoring so many goals that the loss of all those other goal scorers isn't really showing just now. I mean, last season Mbappe, Germain, Lamar, Fabinho, Bernardo Silva all got double figures. This season, the only players with more than one, apart from Falcao, are the centre-halves, Jemison and Glick, with 2 each. So for now, it looks fine because Falcao just keeps scoring, and the other squad members are kicking in here and there. But I think we're going to see more problems if Falcao slows down, if he gets injured again, and we all know that that's just been a recurring theme in his career. Then there is real reason for concern. And the fact that they are now this season, they're chasing in a way that they really weren't last season. I mean, no one expected them to win the league. So when they weren't top, that wasn't a big topic of conversation. And when they went top, it was a surprise. They spent most of the season on top, 21 games, I think, out of 38. So they were being chased. It's a different experience. This season now, then they need to win games and they need to push for wins and for goals. If they lose Falcao, if the other new signings don't begin to kick in the goals that they need them to do, then there's going to be real cause for concern. For now, everything's more or less fine, but I think it's a bit too early to say that the slip up against Nice was just a blip. For now, it seems like a blip, but we have to wait and see.
Yeah, we really have to hope that players like Ronnie Lopez, who got off a mark at Strasbourg, and Rashid Ghazal, who's probably coming off the bench, the likes of Keita and Jovetic as well, who play reasonably well at the weekend. If they can start scoring and chipping in a little bit, it'll take some of that burden off. But it might be also a big season for Thomas Lemar, really, to maybe even crack 15. It might be a bit crazy to ask, but 15 goals will make him certainly one of those players that everyone will be looking to grab in the summer transfer window when that pops around. Let's get some predictions in this one. And I'll start with you, Adam. What do you think's the result in this one?
3-0 Monaco.
And Sam?
I think that probably sounds about right. I think Monaco will probably do this fairly comfortably. I'd say the same, 3-0.
I'm going to go with 5-0, and Marcelo Bielsa decides to maybe try and find a plane ticket out of there for a moment, at least briefly anyway, because he might start losing his sanity again. Let's move on to a couple of teams we've not really talked about this season too much so far, and that's Caen and Amiens. And Sam, I wanted to talk about the hosts first. And Caen have had a decent start to the season with a few wins dotted around, and they've been pretty good at home. What's been their secret to keeping their heads above water again? Because many were thinking that this might have been the season that they looked like nailed on relegation candidates.
Yeah, I think they've made the critics, some of us amongst them, myself included. I thought they would struggle, losing big names and signing players we didn't really know a lot about. But they've made us all look a little bit foolish. This team, when you think of Caen, generally you think of the way they bring through young players. You think of Lamar and Kante, Guerrero, these sorts of players who come through and really shine. But what they've done this season is a little bit different. They've gone and bought really cleverly. They bought Jiku from Bastia for 2 million euros. Looks a great signing. They bought Mbeng for free. He's been sensational. He's been in the team of the week three times this season. They brought Frédéric Gilbert. He's played every minute of every game. They've made some sensational signings, but the reason why they're doing so well and the reason they're winning is because they're just working so hard as a unit. They look so well drilled. So many times last season when they just about barely escaped relegation, they really looked like the relegation fodder that we thought they would be this season, but they don't look that way this season. They look aggressive and they look together, and they're just a really well drilled side. And now Garand, the manager, is looking up the table. He's not looking behind. He said that this weekend he's looking for victory. He says only a victory will do, and that's something quite different to what we've seen from this team in the past. They're looking to the future. They're confident, and they should be, because they're playing well. The defeat against Nantes, frustrating. They didn't play their style, the style that's begun to define them, and they paid for it in losing to, a ridiculous long-range goal. But when you let someone shoot from there, it may well go in, and that typified a deviation from the style that they've made their own this season. That aggressive, fighting for everything, getting to every ball first. It's real simple stuff, but you have to execute it, and they've executed it really, really well.
Yeah, and I'm starting to think when Patrice Goron might get a little bit more recognition for his work at there, because for the last 2 or 3 years, we've thought that this team is probably going to go straight down. And yeah, again, they just keep proving us wrong. And with players like Santini, who keeps getting goals as well, which when they lost Delors, we were worried about. And I always thought that Ronnie Rodeland has been an excellent player for them and an excellent pickup. And like you said, Sam, they've added some extra little pieces that's just made them a little bit more sturdy this time. And hopefully, for them at least anyway, they can keep up this form. They hope, at least against Amiens, Adam, who have slowly grown to life into Ligue. And we mentioned before the show that they sort of looked like a poor mid-table, maybe Ligue 2 side at the start of the season, and were a bit nervous. But despite that defeat to Marseille last week, they've been steadily improving over the weeks, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. And we were, as you say, we were discussing the fact that they looked like they were lacking in quality at the start of the year. Successive promotions from National is a hell of a feat for Christophe Pellissier and his men. I think there was one game in August where 6 of the side that started a Ligue 1 game were with the club while they were in National. So it shows how far they've come. And it shows a little bit perhaps that they're overachieving. And to finish second in what was an extremely close Ligue 2 last year, not just we've talked a lot about the fact that those 6 teams at the end of the year were in with the chance of going up with promotion, but the whole league was very, very close. So perhaps, they overachieved a little bit last season getting promotion, and that they looked in those first 3 games, obviously losing at PSG is no disgrace, but the home defeat at Angers in particular, and then losing at Saint-Etienne 3-0, they looked like a team who are out of their depth. But in a similar way to Caen that Sam mentioned, they've made some really good signings, and they've made some quite a few signings as well, because I feel like they needed to really add that quality, and they've really started to improve. Beat Nice 3-0, really good win at Strasbourg, which was actually a very good game. Second half was end to end after the sending off. That was a very exciting encounter. But you look at Moussa Konate, who was great for Sion, sort of over the last couple of years, tailed off a little bit because I think he kind of wanted his move away and didn't get it. And I think for Amiens to sign a player like him is a really nice little sort of pickup. Lucien Traoré was Monaco's sort of scorer a couple of seasons ago, got 10 in all competitions, I think, which is a good place. Only 27. Everton fans might not remember him that fondly, but for a club like Amiens, again, he's a really, really good signing. Serge Gakpe's got Ligue 1 experience for Nantes, and he sort of bummed around a bit in Italy a little bit, but at 30, he's got experience, and he's a player that will really do a job for them. Look at Nathan on loan from Chelsea, came for Vitesse last season, was ended up first choice for Vitesse last year, and really improved there, and is an exciting addition to their squad. Bogani Zungu, the South African midfielder, who was at Vitória Guimarães last season, who finished 4th in Portugal, really overachieved. He's another really good signing. So they've it looks like they've made some really astute acquisitions, despite losing on Dembele to Lyon, who was fantastic at PSG last week. So they look like they've sort of built a squad a little bit last minute. Most of those players signed in the last week of the window, but they look like they have the quality to compete in this league now. Gael Cooter's been fantastic, by the way, so far. Started the last 5 games and been really, really, really very good. And looks like the type of player that can become a bit of a talisman for this club. So I think if you're an Amiens fan, you're going to have a great season. It's going to be a lot of fun. Whether they stay up is still very much open to debate. It's going to be quite close at the bottom of the table. I think there are 6-7 teams who are very, very evenly matched. But they can compete with those teams now. They can compete with teams above them. Yes, they were a little bit outclassed with the visit of Marseille last week. But I don't think it's necessarily a game they'd be expecting to take 3 points from. The key games will come against those other clubs around them. But they look like a league inside finally. So I'm really happy for them. And there'll be an exciting story to follow and see how they go for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and it can't hurt to have a Nathan in your squad. Most teams should learn that by now. Sam, what do you think in this one?
I think I think they're going to bounce back from the defeat at Nantes, and Caen will win 2-0.
Yeah, I'm going for 2-1 to Caen. They've both been interesting sides this season. I think Amiens maybe should concentrate on those home games against teams like Caen and try and nick the points there. If they can nick a draw in this one, it'd be great. But I think Caen maybe have just a little bit too much for them. Adam?
I'm going to go 1-1. I'm quite confident about Amiens at the moment. I'm going to say they might just nick a draw, so 1 each.
Let's move on to Bordeaux Guingamp, Adam. And Bordeaux had the man we've mentioned quite a fair bit already this season, and that's Malcolm to thank last week for their win at Toulouse, because they were pretty poor other than the Brazilians' wonderful little goal yet again. How big of an influence is he becoming on this team this season?
I think he's a huge influence on this team, not just because of his quality, which is obvious, but he's sort of become a leader too. He sort of leads by example. I think he's the player that the rest of the squad looks to make something happen. They look to give him the ball when they're attacking, and he's become a real sort of playmaker for the entire team. He's so quick. He's got such good vision. He's got such sort of quick feet as well. You really want one-on-one. You really want to be a fullback up against him, and it's still at 20. You know, he's got such a long career ahead of him, and you feel like that if Bordeaux managed to keep him and he's a Bordeaux player this time next year, they would have done extremely well. You're right, in a wider context, you're right. They weren't great overall at Toulouse last week, but Toulouse are a very good side at home, and I think a 1-0 win away at the Stade Municipal would be something that Jocelyn Gourvenec would be very, very happy with, and would have taken very much so as they came into the weekend. And you know, it kind of highlights Malcolm's importance because he won in that game, and these are the type of games that if Bordeaux are going to get back into the Europa League and somehow make up for that horrendous defeat to Videoton in the qualifiers for the Europa League, you feel like Malcolm's going to be a really, really key player for them. But they've got a lot of options in that attacking area now. Nicolas Deprez was a great signing. We talked a lot about him on this pod. I know that you're a bit of a fan of his as well, Nathan. He'll although he hasn't been set, hasn't set the league alight just yet. I think that by Christmas time, you'll see him getting a significant amount of goals and really contributing to that team and really being a really good lieutenant for Malcolm. Jonathan Caffrey's very good as well. Champions League experience was great against PSG last year. Francis Comano's come on really well in the last year or so. Sankara had a good start to the season. So they've got a lot of options suddenly in those sort of attacking and midfield areas. So I expect them to really push for a strong top 6 place. And if they can keep Malcolm fit and keep him playing well, who knows what could happen? It's pretty tight behind PSG and Monaco these days. So I think they're an exciting team to watch, and Malcolm is possibly one of the most exciting players in the league at the moment. So it'd be really good to see how he gets on this weekend and beyond.
Yeah, I really love his little bit of arrogance, and he was absolutely fuming at Nicolas Deprez for not scoring it early in another counter-attack in that game. I love how angry he seems to get the smallest little things. Sam, Guingamp probably deservedly nicked that 1-0 win at home against Lille last week. Is that more of the team that we expected to see after they've started the season pretty slowly?
Yeah. I mean, 2 weeks ago, they played Lyon, and they were arguably the better side and somehow contrived to lose. Against Lille, again, the better side took a stoppage time goal to avoid a second consecutive wasting of a good performance. Had they done that, had they failed to beat Lille, it would have been really dispiriting. That would have been a really bad sign for a team that I think we all think is capable of doing something special this season. I mean, they're not going to be last season's Nice, but for them to make a run at the sort of top 6-ish places, which is within their sort of remit, I think that's something they could do. They needed to win this game, and they need to go on a run and sort of prove that they can compete with the top sides. And this game, Bordeaux, it's a big test, but we do have expectations of this team now, which is different to the past. When they came up from Ligue 2, we didn't have massive expectations, but they've been here a while now. And you look at this team, you look at the quality they have. It's Salabur on one side, Coco on the other, Thuram and Briand through the middle. I mean, that's a Ligue 1 quality attack. That's an attack that can really do things, but they're still too nice. They're still not taking their chances. They're not putting their foot down when they can. The amount of chances against Lille where they just an additional pass unnecessarily, a square to a teammate when they should have just been taking the chance on themselves. They really seem to be doing their best to waste a dominant performance again, and it was frustrating. And they need to develop a bit more of the sort of cold-blooded streak, which is what you need if you're going to compete in the top half. And that's a new thing for Guingamp. It's something they haven't done in the past, and it's something they have to learn. They've got the quality. This late winner against Lille might be the catalyst for improving on those lines, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, what a wonderful goal to win it as well by Etienne Dido. They really, really deserved that win at the weekend, and they'll be delighted that they got it. I'm going for a 2-0 win for Bordeaux, though, in this one. I think they just have a little bit too much quality on those attacking positions, like Adam mentioned earlier. Malcolm, Kamano, I really love as well. They just have a little bit too much, I think, for Guingamp. What are you going for in this one, Adam?
I'm going to go 2-1. I think it'll be a little bit closer, but yeah, Bordeaux to win 2-1.
Sam?
I think Guingamp are going to be the better team, and they're going to find a way to lose 1-0.
It seems to be their recipe against the more difficult sides in Ligue 1 at the moment, for them at least anyway. Let's talk about two sides that have had a slightly more indifferent weekend. And Saint-Etienne won in more of the classic way, you might say, for a Ligue side in recent memory against Dijon. Is their ability to possibly win in this sort of ugly style where they probably maybe didn't deserve all 3 points? They got a very, very suspect penalty as well. Is that key for them, for their goals of reaching Europe this season?
Absolutely. I mean, the reason why Saint-Etienne chose to move on from Galtier was because they wanted to evolve a little bit as a team. And they brought in Oscar Garcia, who is a very, very different style of manager. And if they can knit together those two styles, the solidity, the control of the old Saint-Etienne with Garcia's sort of Barcelona roots that he brings, a bit freer, a bit more attacking, if you can knit those two things together, you really have the makings of something quite special. And you think about maybe looking back at like Arsene Wenger's first couple of years at Arsenal, knitting together his free-flowing attacking football with the brilliant backline of George Graham. That sort of combination of two styles, that worked perfectly, obviously, for Arsenal. If Saint-Etienne can do something similar, then they really will be shooting for Europe, and they will be, they're currently third, and they can realistically aspire to stay there if they can combine those two things, because they have the solidity and they have the ability to win these games. I mean, absolutely, Dijon could have won that game. They had a goal disallowed rather harshly, the fortunate penalty to decide the game, as you mentioned. These are the kind of things that we like to roll out the cliches. These are the games you win to win you titles. They're not going to win the title this year, but for them, their title would be third. I mean, that's the real title outside of the top two, and for them to stay where they are would be a huge achievement. And games like this, games where they show they can still be serious, be solid, and win gritty, are vital, because they've played football in other games. In this game, they just had to find a way to win, and they did it.
Yeah, I still can't believe that penalty decision, and I feel sorry for a Dijon side that were desperate to get the points after winning the week before as well. Adam, Rennes were again very good against Nice, really, but they were pretty unlucky to lose from another great strike from Mario Balotelli. Are those last two games, including that, obviously, that win against Marseille, proving that Gourcuff's maybe turning things around?
Yeah, I think so. I think from my point of view, Christian Gorkov, although he's had a little bit of criticism recently, perhaps he's been accused of being a little bit tactically unflexible, which is obviously which is fair enough. He has a way of going about things, and that doesn't necessarily always work, but it has proven very sort of fruitful in the past. The 10 years he was at Lorient were fantastic, and he's a very, very astute and he's a good manager. He's very experienced, and he's good at getting the best out of certain types of players. So I think that although they started the season slowly, that they were always going to find a way to sort of to come good, if you like. And Gorkov was always going to find a way to get the best out of this team. If you look at the squad that they've got, they had quite a big turnover in the summer as well. They lost a lot of forwards and signed a lot of forwards. Ismail Assar coming in, not being used in the same position that he was at Metz, being used as a central striker, which is unusual. But he's taken time to adapt. And I know that Andres, my fellow Ligue analyst at Football Radar, who's also been on this podcast before, has really sort of felt like he's really improved every game so far this season. So he's a player that could turn out to be huge for them. Wabi Kaz, we know the qualities that he's got in Ligue 1 for Bordeaux. We talked about that previously on the pod as well, with sort of his return being a bit of he needs to sort of prove a point in Ligue 1 after a terrible time at Sunderland. So they're a team with quality, and I think that although Gorkov might take a bit of time in finding the way to get the best out of that quality, that he was given his experience and his legal know-how, if you like, he was always going to find a way to do that. So I think Rennes are a team that would be quite interesting to keep an eye on over the course of the year, because they might quietly sort of sneak up into the the top third of the table, perhaps even one into the top half at least, sort of under the radar to some extent. Benjamin Andre is still a very, very good player for them. They've got Johan Gorkov to come back as well. Benjamin Beauregard, I really like. He was great for Lens last season. So no, they've got quality, and they're sort of coming up, like I said, under the radar. And I think Gorkov is fully capable of not necessarily putting off a surprise with this team, but definitely making them very, very competitive and a team you wouldn't want to play. So I think that they'll be absolutely fine for the rest of the year, and who knows where Gorkov can take them. I honestly think he's still a very, very good manager.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that a player like Borrego seems to get better and better each game he plays. He seems to gain more confidence and starts to sort of adapt to Ligue 1 life as well. So I'll start with you, Adam, then. What are you going for the result in this one?
I'm going to go for a very Ligue 1-1 draw.
I'm going for a sneaky Saint-Etienne 1-0 to maintain their current attempt of playing a little bit ugly. It might be a bit of a lucky one for them on this one. Sam?
I think Saint-Etienne are a really good side for Rennes to come up against. I think stylistically it's going to be really interesting. Two very different sides. But I do think Saint-Etienne, as you say, they've still got that ability to win ugly. I think something like 1-0 to win, 2-1 perhaps, just to be different for Saint-Etienne.
Yeah, I worry a little bit that Rennes played so well and still couldn't quite grab a goal. I'm still worried about them attacking-wise, getting the goals that they need in these games against bigger sides, you might say. Let's move on to another interesting game. And we mentioned on our main show on Monday, Adam, and they've got 4 straight clean sheets now. It's a real positive for them, and 3 wins in the last 4. Is that a foundation now that Ranieri can possibly build on?
Yes, I definitely think so. And I think that's the way that Ranieri sees it too. He's talked a lot about, I was a little bit surprised to see him take this sort of tact, but he's talked a lot about defence being his number 1 priority, and that not conceding a goal is the thing that his team should look to do more than anything else. Rather than perhaps beforehand, he's been a little bit more attacking at Leicester, and the way they obviously thought their title to win was an aberration in football terms. That type of thing probably won't happen again in the foreseeable future, at least. But they were very attacking at times, and they played quite a sort of that 4-4-2 that he utilised. They were obviously very dangerous at times, and I expected him to sort of continue in the same way that Sergio Conceição did in a very similar setup going forward in this season. But he said that, as I said, that he's focusing on defence, and that strong base makes a little bit more sense in Ligue 1, I suppose, because it's obviously a little bit more defensive league, certainly than the Premier League. Fullbacks don't usually get forward too much, and there are less goals. games are much, much tighter. And if you don't concede goals, then you're very likely to get a point if you're that defensive. Sort of playing with five at the back, he's sort of given Lucas Lima, who is a player I very like at left back, a little bit more license to get forward from left wing back now. Leo Dubois is very similar on the other side, and he's sort of used Nicola Power, Kofi Gigi is a very good centre back on his day, and Diogo Carlos very well. And that's honestly where the strength is in the team. So it makes sense for him to sort of focus on that area of the squad. They've got a decent defensive sort of backbone, if you like. But whether that's sort of his long-term plan, or whether it's something that he sees as like a starting point is the thing that will be really interesting with Nantes, because they've always been a very defensive club, at least since I've been covering the league, which is sort of 4 or 5 seasons now. They under Mikel de Zakarian, they finished 14th 2 seasons in a row and were bottom scorers and then second bottom scorers in both those years, and really struggled to score goals. And Ranieri seems to have reverted to that after a bit of a flirtation with attacking football under Conceição. So whether he can sort of circumvent that sort of what I see as not as a very defensive team will be interesting to see in the long run. He has the players to do that. Valentin Rongier signed a new deal this week, which is a really big thing for them. A player I really like. Hopefully he can overcome his latest injury, and we'll see him play against Strasbourg at the weekend. Pajas Nakuma's sort of come in from the cold a little bit, who was very good for them last year, came off the bench after missing the last 4 games before that. So he's got weapons too. So I think it'd be interesting to see, this is possibly an opportunity to see whether he can sort of expand on that defensive base, and whether he'll start doing it now, whether it'll be later in the season, or whether they keep getting results like this. So the evolution of this team will be really interesting. But like I said, I think he's got the weapons to do both. So it'd be a fascinating ride for Nantes fans season. Perhaps not the roller coaster one that they hoped, but an intriguing one nonetheless.
Yeah, what is it unlike an Italian to stick to his defensive roots? You wouldn't say
it's not, is it at all?
That is a very Claudio Ranieri way of thinking about things. Sam, Strasbourg failed to score in 4 of the first 6 games, which might be a little bit worrying when I get that Nantes stat if they've kept 4 straight clean sheets. Is their lack of firepower a real worry for their fight against relegation?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as you say, they've only scored in 4 of their 6 games, but I mean, it's arguably even worse than that. They've scored 4 goals total. 3 of those came in the exceptional game against Lille, goalkeeper sent off, outfield player in goal against 10 men. Those goals, I mean, they count on the scoreboard, but for the purposes of this discussion, they've scored 1 goal against a professional goalkeeper this season. That's really an underwhelming statistic, and that means the best they can really hope for in most games is a goalless draw. If they can't threaten the opposition goal, then the best that they can do is a goalless draw. And if that's your minimum and your maximum, your margin of error is just so thin. They've had tough fixtures. They've played Lyon, Guingamp, Monaco away. You wouldn't really expect promoted sides to win those games, but you might expect them to sort of put up a fight, and they didn't really do that. And that's the worry. The fact that they're not really threatening the opposition at all. They are making chances, though, is the one thing that's sort of in their favour. They've made 50 chances, goal-scoring chances this season. Monaco have only made 69. So when you put it in those terms, it doesn't look so bad. But if you can't put the chances away, it's a meaningless statistic you can look at next season when you're in Ligue 2. They just don't have a goal scorer. Idris Sadi is their sort of main attacker. He's the number 9. He's never done it at this level. He played well last season in Belgium, scored goals, but he's never really done it at the top level in France. His year in England, in Wales with Cardiff, didn't get a goal, not great. They just really don't have anyone to put chances away and to really threaten the opposition goalkeeper. And if you don't score, you don't win. If you don't win, you don't stay up. So it's really that simple.
Yeah, and I think I'll steal a march on everyone's possible prediction on this one, and I'm going for a goalless draw, as Sam alluded to it. But when you're facing a defence that's kept so many clean sheets and not scored many goals against a team that's barely scored any goals, it's got 0-0 written all over it for me. Sam, what's your prediction?
It's hard to argue with the goalless draw.
Adam?
I think Nantes will sneak it 1-0.
I thought we were going to get a clean sweep then. Let's focus back now on the Sunday's final game, and that's Marseille hosting Toulouse. And Adam, it was a bit of a shift in personnel for Marseille that helped them get back on track last week. Should they stick with the likes of Ng playing as a central striker and Dimitri Payet playing as more of a number 10 behind him?
Yes, I think two questions that Rudy Garcia should ask himself here, and it's often the way I think about this is how does he get the best out of his best players? And you have to say that Dimitri Payet is comfortably his best player. So is he better on the left wing in a 4-3-3, or is he better at A-mid in a 4-2-3-1, or even a diamond? And I'd argue that he's probably played his best football as an attacking midfielder, or in a central position. So it makes sense for him to want to move Payet inside. But then I would argue also that I think Morgan Sanson's been one of their best players this season. And does that compromise Morgan Sanson's role in the team? He didn't start last week. I think he was sort of rested after the Europa League game. But I would like to see Garcia find a way to get the best out of both of those two players. I mean, Sanson could play on the left. He could play slightly deeper alongside a sort of defensive midfielder, whether that's Luis Gustavo or even Sandro Anguissa. But whether that gets the best out of him is another question. So I think I would personally perhaps even keep Payet on the left or move to a sort of a diamond midfield. But that's obviously not something that they sort of tested this season. So that's probably not an option at the moment. But I still think that he should be careful not to compromise Morgan Sanson's ability, who I think has been quietly very, very good for Marseille, despite the fact the team have been pretty poor. And secondly is the forward line. So Valère Germain is a player I'm a huge fan of, and I thought he was fantastic at Nice 2 seasons ago, and again at Monaco last year. Very unlucky to be on the wrong end of Kylian Mbappe's sort of emergence. He was very, very good, and it goes under the radar a little bit that the first half of the season he was fantastic for Monaco last year and really did contribute to their title win. But his time at Marseille so far has been a little bit up and down. He was fantastic in the Europa League against Ostende. I don't think he's got a league goal yet, though, so he's been a little bit anonymous. And I think his issue is that he's not really a striker that plays on his own up front. Monaco last season, obviously, they had 4-4-2, and he's playing with Falcao a lot, even with Mbappe a lot when Falcao was injured. And I think he needs more support. So by playing Dimitri Payet in a central role, you get that French sort of 9.5 role that Payet played a little bit for France last summer, and that he's very capable of doing. And it gives Germain, as it did Olivier Giroud, the help of or the assistance of someone playing close to them or off them or even running beyond them on occasions. So I think that if that suits Germain, then I'd play Payet perhaps off Germain in a more central role. But then Ng has been really good this season. He's got 4 more goals than Germain in Ligue 1. He scored twice last week. One was very, very fortunate, perhaps. But he is scoring goals, and he looked good in a couple of preseason games too. So, and he's much more capable of perhaps playing as a central striker on his own. He's quicker, and he's very much happier to run in behind. So that role suits Ng a little bit more. Personally, I think Germain's a better player, but like I said, you might need some help. If you were to move to that's a diamond, which is what I quite like that because it's kind of a classic French formation with Le Carré Magique from the 80s of Jaurès and Tigana and Platini and Fernandez. That who plays alongside Germain, and does that suit Florian Thauvin? So perhaps Garcia has to make a tough decision and drop Germain, or at least rotate him and Ng a little bit more in the attempts to get the best out of his other players. Question, and I personally would like to see Germain play if he's playing well, but I don't know that he can justify him starting at the moment. And she scored twice last week. He's a striker in form. He's scoring goals, so perhaps that 4-3-3 needs to give Payet a little more space to come inside and stick with Ng for now.
Yeah, and I'm sure Marseille fans will be delighted to keep reminding people that Ng scored more goals than Neymar so far this season. But at the same time, I think most of Ng's have come up body parts he didn't realise he had for most of the time they scored goals. They do seem to be a...
They all count, though. They all count.
Yeah, that's what they'll always tell you. But Sam, Toulouse should have really done better against Bordeaux. Where there's a few glaring misses. I remember Ola Toivonen having a great header that he should have scored, really, and a counter for Corentin Jean that on another day on one-on-one situation he should be really sticking away. Is there a real worry that this team could be big underachievers of the season if they can't put their chances away when they get them against teams?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was an incredibly frustrating performance to watch from a sort of Toulouse perspective. They need to get some wins, and that was a really good opportunity against an out of sorts, underperforming themselves Bordeaux team. They couldn't beat Troyes. They should have beat Bordeaux and somehow managed to lose. I mean, Toivonen himself had enough chances to win 10 games, but they just didn't. They're not putting these chances away. They're not making that many chances either. We mentioned just before chances created. Toulouse have only made 38. That's just not good enough. We underperforming side, but it's a very mixed bag of talent. Goalkeeper obviously excellent, backline settled, really really strong. They've got good parts here and there, but they're still trying to fit them together. Imbulla looks better and better. He looked very good against Bordeaux. Gradle still to come back. There's quality here and there, but this team, they seem to have gone backwards from last season, and where they were almost surprise packets, but they dropped off roughly halfway through the season last season, and they've carried that form into this season. So they don't have the wins that they got early last year to inflate their position. So they're left sitting a lot further down the table than they might otherwise be. If they were winning the games that they could have, should have won, they'd be up in the top 6. But they're not. They're in the bottom half, 13th, level with Amiens. That's not really good enough for a team with the ambition to sort of kick on, to take this young, exciting team and develop and really move forward. But if they can't do that against a Bordeaux team that was there to be beaten, and not only did they not win, but they lost, that's a real concern, because, they're going to have harder games than that. They're going to have games against teams that actually want to try and beat them, which Bordeaux weren't really trying to do. Bordeaux were opening the gate, and Toulouse couldn't walk through it. It was an incredibly frustrating performance. And if that's going to become the thing this season, I mean, they just can't win games. It's really frustrating, and they really they don't look like relegation candidates, but stranger things have happened. Bigger teams in Toulouse have gone down, and they could find themselves in trouble if they just can't start scoring some goals.
Yeah, I say underachievers because it feels like this team should be good enough. They've got Delors had a great experience in Ligue going before. Jean's a good player. Toivonen's got great experience. They've got a great defence. The midfield with Imbulla, like you mentioned, Sam, looks better. With Gradel and Dermaz looks better this season as well. You think there's enough there to get results, but they're struggling at the moment to find that extra gear to really go in. Adam, what do you think in this one?
I think I have a feeling it's going to be not the most exciting of games. I have a feeling it might be 0-0. Just a quick point on Toulouse. I think Oscar Trejo is a big miss for them. They haven't really replaced him. He's sort of that number 10 can create, and all the players they have signed don't really replace his sort of type of player. So I think they're kind of missing that sort of guile of a number 10. So I think this might be a 0-0.
I'm going to go for a 1-0 win for Marseille on this one. I think they'll just pip Toulouse to the post. Sam, what do you think?
It's a tough one to pick. It really is. I mean, Marseille haven't looked great, but they look like they're sort of getting there. They're coming together piece by piece. Toulouse have looked okay for 2/3 of their games, but just contrived to not take their chances. So I think it's probably a goalless draw.
That's all for this week. My thanks to Adam, Sam, and for all of you joining us this evening. The main show will be back with all the thrills and spills from the weekend on Monday. But now, enjoy your weekend of football that's yet to come.